Future Hacker. Life. Path. Future.
Hello everybody and welcome to Future Hacker. I'm your host, Maria Taiji, and today we're talking to Itai Talmi. Itai is helping leaders benefit from applied human-centered futures so they can discover and create futures worth aspiring for. He's been designing and choreographing Strategic Futures R&D and transformative innovation initiatives for over 20 years. As an executive, a senior consultant and partner, and as an entrepreneur all over the world. He's led projects for Fortune 500 companies, NGO'S, cities, countries, academy, and special projects for entrepreneurs. Born Partners is his company, and he's the founding participant and ambassador of THNK School of Creative Leadership. And he's our very first guest from Israel, believe it or not, everybody. So, hi, Itai. Thank you so much for being here with us. How are you doing today?
I'm great. Thank you for having me. I'm quite proud and joyful to take part in it.
That's awesome. So, Itai, you say you organize expeditions to discover futures of new values. So how's that?
What a great question. Expeditions. I will let you know how I got to the term expeditions, which I quite like. It came from the difficulty of shifting managers or anybody's mind from the short-term tunnel vision, myopic look at the now. Usually, people in corporates or even entrepreneurs sometimes are looking from quarter to quarter. They're looking at the low-hanging fruits, as they say in McKinsey. Meaning, let's think as soon as possible. Let's scrape the profits that exists only 1 minute away. Let's not plan too far because I don't know what's going to happen. I might lose my job. The board might cancel it. I don't care, or, I don't have a vision. We are a group of operational executives, which I find a lot of CEOs mostly busy with operational activities, and they don't have time. They don't have the system to plan seriously, to look ahead, to create a future, which is maybe the most important job of a CEO or any head of any kind of organization, to create, to enable a future for that organization, even for himself. So, with all the difficulties of many years of workshops, of specifically trying to work with the minds of managers of all kinds, and the difficulty, the sometimes inability or sometimes lack of desire to relax and to immerse themselves into a speculative hour of imagination. After that, they can go back to work. We're just asking them for a few hours of imagination, a few hours of blue sky. And it's very difficult for many reasons. So I found that the word expedition, the term, the analogy, the metaphor, if you want, of expedition allows them to get into a mental state which is kind of an adventurous mind space. In that kind of capsule, if you want, mind capsule, they can imagine, they can explore new territories. It relates into history. It has great stories. They aspire to be like great leaders of the past and great explorers of the North Pole or whatever. So I found that a bit of romantic analogy really is being received really nicely, being registered very nicely, and it gets them into a mode, emotionally, mentally, operationally, into a survival mode, like a soft survival mode, which they can assume that everything can happen because we are on adventure. We are free of constraints. We are free of prejudice. We are free of any kind of thing we hold on. We're going and we're going to come back. We're like space explorers. And I build on it, and I build like 3 stages, which in the first stage, I kind of prepare them for the expedition. What are we going to explore? What is the big question? What do they need to prepare, both body and mind? What do they need to take? What do they need to leave behind? What do they need to tell to the other ambassadors or the other stakeholders that they're going? What they hope to bring back? And the second stage is the actual expedition, where we kind of explore all kinds of methodologies from futures, strategy, foresight, strategic foresight, design fiction, science fiction, what we call speculative design, all kinds of techniques, even design thinking that allows, and we mingle it with all kinds of survival kind of tactics a bit to get them into the mode. And we are doing kind of strategic imagination, and we explore all kinds of possible futures. Then we pick the desired futures, which is based on science, which is based on facts, which is based on the context that the ecosystem is living in, the business ecosystem or social ecosystem. And then at the end, we prototype something that resembles, that can portray, that can exhibit this kind of desired future, to go back to the organization and to show it to everybody and to bring gifts from that expedition. So there's more details, but in general, that's the framework. I'm trying it in the last year or two, and it works well because sometimes people feel very comfortable or more easy to navigate through analogies and metaphor, which keeps them more safe. Kind of psychological safety kind of exercise in a way. So it allows me to open their mind and let them speculate totally open with all kinds of situations and simulations and scenarios that usually they will not go into it. So after they're back, they're mostly very in a high kind of energy, and it's nice, it's cool. You learn a lot, and even if you don't find a new territory, you come back with a lot anyway.
You know what I like about your approach is that you work with people's internal transformation, as you're saying, to then go to the external factors. So seems like a very interesting process. Itai, but as I mentioned, you're our very first guest from Israel, right? So which is known to be one of the world's innovation centers. You told me Israel is the land of paradox, right? So how is it to be an entrepreneur there? And do you have any advice for the future hackers that are trying to find their way out there?
Israel is a land of paradox for many, many reasons. First of all, it's nice that the image, this really strong brand, as far as I know, as a startup nation still works, because our global ambassadors mostly, or most loudly, and most successfully, actually, I think, is the high-tech sector. It doesn't mean that the rest of Israel is benefiting from it, or it's directly related to the country of Israel for many, many reasons. The high-tech sector is not that easy to get in. It's built on a very specific segment of society. The mobilization of society to get into the high-tech sector is not that easy. There's a lot of hurdle race for people that do not come from the specific background. It's like a friend brings a friend, and, people that are very close to the plate, if I can say it. It doesn't sound so good, but so it's a very small sector, relatively to the whole industry, relatively to 9 million people. It's very small, tens of thousands of people, the core, and makes noise like the whole of US. We are like in the top 5 in the world or something like that. It's about ingenuity. It's about the ingenuity of some of our people. These people are starting at a very early age, these very specific people. Then they go to the army and they're doing it in the army. And then they go out and they usually, that's most of the high-tech industry. We are very creative in specific segments. But in terms of wealth, in terms of economic value, in terms of greater society, we're not a startup nation. Our education system is really behind. It's awfully orthodox and awfully behind the world, very archaic. You have to break the mold. You have to be a renegade. You have to be a rebel in order to find your own path within that. And these are the entrepreneurs. They find their own path and they get out of the system to become entrepreneurs. They don't follow the system. So it's kind of a spearhead for entrepreneurs from Israel. Of course, all I tell them is try to get out of Israel as soon as possible. With a project, without a project, if you want to succeed in the world. For entrepreneurs that are coming to Israel, it's usually not a problem. We like people from abroad. We even communicate better with people from abroad that come to work with us for some reason, less with our own people. We have too many tribes, and the tribes are like in constant rivalry, especially now with the political agenda and the social agenda, which is very severe, which is very us and them. The orthodox religious right against liberal humanistic left. It's like a big, huge divide between them. And it doesn't help the high-tech industry, and it doesn't help anything. It doesn't help our image. So anybody that comes from the outside will find very friendly faces, very friendly dialogue, extremely open to new ideas, extremely open to new collaborations. We're working very, very fast. We don't like protocols. Sometimes we destroy things on the way, but we're running very fast. I'm talking in general, but you can expect unorthodox thinking. You can expect thinking out of the box as a default, thinking inside the box. That's our problem. It's a technological creativity. It's analytical creativity, mostly. Less my kind of creativity, which is humanistic creativity. It's mostly very, very technology-wise, and human is a support element. I look at it the other way. For me, it's human first. Technology is a supporting element. So I'm a bit kind of a different kind of bird within the industry. But thankfully, the industry is so much eager for creativity of any kind, anything that can propel, so it's an easier dialogue. With the low tech, with the usual corporations, it's a very specific, extremely hard dialogue. Almost impossible for many, many kind of types like me, for example.
Thank you. It was such a great background and scenario you drew. A lot of new information for me personally, and I'm sure the listeners will appreciate that. As I said, it's the first person from Israel we got, so it's pretty great. Thanks for sharing. And, following that line, there are a couple of interesting statements that you told me when we met that I'd like you to cover. So you say that startups survive because of empathy.
Yes, indeed. It all comes back to a very simple rule. Human first. That's the whole thing. It's all about human. There's no B2B. There's no B2C. There's only age to age, human to human. We create together. We talk together. We have to we have to bear and contain each other's presence when we work together for hours and hours in a hurdle race, in an ups and downs mood, in a very hard and demanding kind of atmosphere of startup. It's all begins and starts with empathy. If we cannot contain the other and kind of flow and kind of adapt to each other's craziness and habits and all kinds of micro culture habits and things, we cannot do anything together. And everything in a startup or any kind of organization, I always say that every organization is 100% human-made. A startup, it's a non-organization. It's like an organization in a perpetuum mobile or it builds itself as it flies. But it's an organization. And it's people that think together, that think solutions together, that solves problems together, that decides on going together, that convince other people together, that gives orders or they give instructions to other people to do something they want, that they have to convey it in a way that the other person will move with passion. We're talking about people that actually live together. And they don't make a lot of money when you are in a startup, at least at the beginning, unless you're very spoiled. And even it doesn't matter if you're spoiled or not. Anyway, it's a group of people, usually 3 or 4 or 2, that live together, usually in one space, and they have to create instructions to other people in between them, so the other guys will create exactly what they want, so they will get to the result they want. The actual passing of instruction or wish or a demand on ask or any kind of communication between two people must convey empathy. It must reach in an empathetic mode. Otherwise, the other side will not do it. I mean, if you don't speak with empathy, it will not work. It will be friction and collision, and the thing will break. Anyway, it's very hard to stay in a startup because all the pressures from the stakeholders around it. And you have to stand in front of investors, and you have to be very empathetic with them. Yeah, sometimes you have to suffer and contain harsh words and very strong kind of criticism. For that, you have to be a very empathetic person, to contain it and to flow with it and not to be impulsive, not to be inhuman. So humanity creates together. People create with each other via communication. Communication can be even with a wink. It doesn't have to be with actual talking or drawing. It can be with building. It can be with clapping your hands. Any kind of communication. It can be emotional, mental, physical, whatever. But things are created by human beings by empathetic conversation. Any kind of conversation that leads to something fruitful will be based on empathy. Investors do not invest in products. They invest in people. They invest in leaders or a leader. And if the leader is not empathetic, doesn't know how to lead other people, then it will not work. So even the hardcore VCs that only, look at their financial Excels will tell you that. We invest in people. Also, because when there's a need for a transformation or pivot, where the market is not accepting or receiving your products, you have to shift. You have to transform. It might create all kinds of changes within your organization. And if the empathy is not there, it will not happen. You will not be able to do transformation. You have to rethink, redirect your products or whatever. For that, you need to be very patient, very much altruistic, very much people's person. If you're not, then startup living is not for you.
It makes so much sense, Itai. And that's usually the kind of things that you don't read in the entrepreneur's book, right? Like having empathy, and it's so critical, and you're so right. So unfortunately, we are out of time, but we are going to keep going naturally. So this is the end of episode 1, but stay tuned, everybody. We're going to episode 2 with Future Hacker.
Future Hacker. Life. Path. Future.